Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining all of us tonight, and a warm welcome to the Mastering Your 2025 Intern Applications live webinar with two of our amazing guests, Amanda Viera and Deon Haar. Thank you both for taking the time to share your insights with us tonight. It's definitely very valuable for us, especially going into our intern applications. And before we do commence, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we present from today, the people of the Kulin Nations, and the traditional custodians of the land you may be joining us from. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. To introduce our organisations, the clubs, Dose of Pharma. It's a podcast designed to explore a variety of career pathways and ways to grow both personally and professionally within the realm of science. And VPSA, the Victorian Pharmacy Students Association, is a student-led not-for-profit organisation striving to enhance the overall pharmacy student experience through hosting a variety of events such as networking, educational and social events. And without further ado, I welcome our host, Talia, to take it away. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Minsanti, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's live panel discussion, as Minsanti said, hosted by VPSA and Dose of Pharma. So my name's Talia Rahman, and I'll be your host for tonight, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with our incredible guest tonight, and I really hope that you all are as well. On our panel tonight, we have two amazing guests. So we've got Amanda Viera, a recent pharmacy intern and presently a clinical pharmacist at Alfred Health. And we have Deon Haar, who has an extensive background in recruitment of over 15 years. He has co-founded companies and has specialised in community pharmacy recruitment and career consulting services. So to begin our discussion tonight, I would just like our guests to introduce themselves a bit more. I might start with Deon and then we'll go to Amanda, if that's okay.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. As mentioned, my name's Deon Haar. I founded about 6 or 7 years ago a business called Nationwide Pharmacy Services, and it was essentially created to help bridge the gap between largely regional and remote pharmacies and the talent that they need to keep their business running. It was then and is still now a very, very, we call it candidate scarce. It is a very, very candidate short sector that we operate in. But it's really great to be able to help people get from, when we engage with a candidate, a pharmacist, they're at point A, they want to get to point B, and we can help them get there. It's cool. It's a really rewarding way to do business. So hopefully we can help out tonight.
Thank you, Deon. It's very exciting and we can't wait to hear more about your journey. Amanda, would you be able to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Amanda. I am currently working at the Alfred Hospital. I completed my internship last year at the Alfred Hospital, and I've just started the SHPA Foundation Residency 2-year program this year. I had lots of community and hospital jobs throughout university, so hopefully I can share a lot of tips for interviews and internship applications.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. So let's begin. So the first part of our discussion is really around pathfinding. So for our first question, what made you both pursue your current career path? Deon, if you'd like to start answering this one.
Yeah, when I got into recruitment, I didn't even know really that recruitment agencies existed. I moved here from New Zealand. I'd never gone through a recruitment agency. I moved over here in 2006. And started interviewing for jobs myself and started going through agencies, learnt what they were about, and I pretty quickly thought that it might be quite a fun thing to do for a little while. And 18 years later, here we are, still in it. The pharmacy-specific side of things, I was working in an organisation with a lady who was brokering the sale and purchase of pharmacies, and she was talking to a lot of people who either wanted to buy a pharmacy, but they were buying it from someone who was leaving, so they needed to find a pharmacist to put into that business, or they were she was dealing with someone who was selling their pharmacy, and they wanted to find someone to put in so that it was basically a ready-made business that would continue to go as a going concern and could be sold. So, and as I said before, we just discovered how candidate short it is, and for the 12 or so years leading up to that, we'd worked in other candidate scarce and candidate short markets. So, I guess we had the tools and resources to find these people, and we've been doing it ever since.
Amazing. Thank you, Deon, for sharing that. It's a really cool path that you've pursued, and we're excited to hear more tonight. And Amanda, what about yourself?
I actually wanted to do pharmacy for a really long time, since about year 9 in high school. So I know that's not everyone's trajectory. Some people chop and change and then eventually find that they want to do pharmacy, but I've known for quite a long time. I worked in both community and hospital as a student, and I really enjoyed both areas. So I did have a hard time choosing kind of which path to follow, but I really love the complexity of hospital pharmacy and that interaction with the other healthcare professionals, with the doctors on the ward and the nurses, and just being such a valued member of the healthcare team, and being able to help out both patients, but then, also answering questions from nurses and doctors. So I find it really rewarding. I hope eventually I'll be able to kind of balance to be able to do maybe a little bit of community as well. But at the moment, it's quite busy in hospital and doing weekend shifts as well. So I've really enjoyed that so far, though. And I enjoy rotating to different areas. So that's why I chose to continue with a foundation residency after internship, so that I can continue to learn in different areas of pharmacy.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda, as well, for sharing that. Well, without a doubt, intern year is a very stressful year, and it's a big decision that we're going to have to make, whether we're going to go down the community route or the hospital route. Do either of you have any advice for students who are a little bit unsure about which route to pursue?
Amanda, you might be better to answer that, given that you do it.
I feel like it can be really tricky to decide. There's aspects of both, at least in my case, there's aspects of both areas that I really enjoyed. I really liked the patient interactions in community, having your regular patients, being able to follow up on them. And if you've made a change or you've made an intervention, you then see them the next week, see how they're going, or you've recommended a product and then they come back and they say, oh, I'm really grateful for your help. This product's made a difference, things like that. So I really enjoyed that aspect of community. But then on the flip side, on the hospital placements, I love seeing that how valued the pharmacists were in their teams, and being able to answer those questions and provide medication advice on dosing, or if they can crush medications, or things like that. So I found it quite tricky to decide, but I guess for intern year, there's benefits of both. In terms of community, it's super helpful for your exam revision, all the over-the-counter topics, because you're exposed to that every single day. Whereas if you're in hospital, you kind of have to put more effort on specifically studying those areas. But then if you want to kind of have that ability to rotate to see different areas, then hospital internship's great, because you move between gen med, surgery, cardiology, you get exposed to a lot of different areas as well. So I feel like it really depends on the individual, but both have different advantages, and you get exposed to different areas, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree with that. Without a doubt, both have their positives. Community, it's really lovely having regular patients and, building that rapport with them. And on the other side, hospital, getting to work in that multidisciplinary team is absolutely amazing too. On the topic, I guess, of community internships. So a lot of students, I guess, were under the impression that in order to get a community internship, you either ask your workplace or maybe apply through any advertised sites like Seek or LinkedIn. Deon, do you have any advice on other ways to get a community internship?
Yeah, look, I think your biggest, most valuable tool when it comes to getting your internship is LinkedIn. If LinkedIn was around when I went through uni, and that was a long time ago, and I knew what I knew about it now, I would probably have spent more time on LinkedIn than I spent in class. You're able to identify the geography that you either are currently working in, or where you're going to relocate when you start your internship, where you want to do it. Find the people who own those pharmacies and start to build a relationship with them. So, and I guess the other benefit of doing it that way, I certainly see the point of the Facebook groups, the Seek ads, etc. But the thing about all of those is that you're in competition with everybody else, or with a lot of other people. Whereas, if you've got 3 months, 6 months of experience building a relationship and getting to know the owners of pharmacies that are in the areas that you might want to do your internship, I think that's incredibly valuable. Obviously, it's great if you're already working in a pharmacy. You're really, really on the front foot, but If you're not, getting to know those people and getting on their radar is, I think, the most powerful thing you can do.
Yeah, definitely. And 100% networking and making strong connections is just so important. And LinkedIn is definitely an incredible way to do so. I'm personally a really big fan of LinkedIn for those that know me. So definitely will second that point for sure. On a similar note as well, I guess for Amanda, in terms of the hospital side of things, students, well, we only get two preferences if we're applying through the SHPA portal. Now, do you have any advice in terms of these preferences? Should it be places that we've already built these rapport and these relationships, or should it be, or could it be even places that we haven't had placements at and haven't had the chance to do so?
It can definitely be places that you haven't had necessarily placements at or worked at. Like, it can be a bit tricky with hospital because there might be a particular hospital that focuses on an area that you really enjoy, but you just happen to not be allocated a placement there because it's not as close as another hospital and things like that. So I definitely don't think it should be a deterrent if you haven't necessarily done a placement there. Like, it can be an advantage that you kind of know how they run, or you might have chatted to their student coordinator, so then you've built a little bit of a connection there. In my case, the two hospitals that I put first and second, one of them I did work at, and another one I had one placement there. But I don't think, it's necessarily a deciding factor. Like, I hadn't actually done a clinical placement at the hospital I worked at anyway, so it doesn't, specifically determine whether you'll get a spot or not. Like, it can be a bit more easier to kind of talk about what they offer there, but if you do your research and you talk to students who have done placement there or their current interns, I think they can provide you with a lot of helpful information as well, like about those hospitals and their intern programs.
Yeah, definitely. I think the point you make is very valid. Doing your research is absolutely essential, whether it be looking at even the hospital website, talking to the education pharmacists, or even looking at, I always recommended to look at strategic plans as well for the hospital, just to get a bit of a gauge on future plans. So I thought that was a really bit of interesting advice too. Without a doubt as well, these industries, whether it's community or hospital, they're very competitive. Do either of you have some advice on things that recruiters look for in terms of your resume, things that might help students stand out?
I think probably one of the things that we get feedback on the most is someone's stability, which is difficult when you are or you have been a student, because a lot of times those roles that you're in, you're really doing them to get money so you can move out or be in a flat or whatever. So you're not really thinking, okay, how long I spend in each one of these roles might actually be a factor in if I get picked up for an internship down the track. But certainly, having that stability, it is something that employers are going to look to. At the end of the day, you've got to remember, I guess, as harsh as it might sound, commercially, these people are running businesses, and getting somebody in, embedding them, inducting them, training them up, and then having them leave for something else is a big inconvenience for them. So stability is going to give them some reassurance that even if things do get a little bit tricky, you'll stick at it. Obviously, things like your grades, the areas of pharmacy that maybe where you've gone extracurricular to expand your knowledge base, they're all really important as well. Important things to include.
Yeah, definitely. Amanda, anything to add, or do you pretty much agree
think
with
something
that?
I did on my applications was have like specific achievements, because it kind of seems like, oh, everyone's got the same experience, everyone's done placement. So I think really going specific in things that you achieved on that placement, like say you helped out with an audit, say you can literally write, we audited this area of the hospital and this led to a change in a guideline, or it led them to do another study to improve practice. Like, being really specific in your achievements. Like on my CV, I had like key responsibilities that I had at that job, and then I had a title, achievements, and put like employer of the month this week for going above and beyond for patient care, or like, being really specific in when you've gotten positive feedback from someone, or what you achieved in your research project, what you achieved on your placement, can help make you stand out more, because majority of people will have a part-time job in pharmacy and have done the same placement. So I think you have to make it specific to what you've done to try and stand out.
Yeah, definitely. So just on that note, I guess, about achievements and grades, do you think that putting your GPA, your WAM on your resume is a good idea, or you'd probably like refrain from doing that?
I feel like it really depends on the person. I personally did have it on my CV. I don't think it's a deciding factor though. I think maybe 2 out of the 3 hospitals that I got an interview for asked for like an academic transcript. So they don't all necessarily ask to see your grades.
Right.
Obviously, like if you haven't got it on there and then they ask for it, then you can send it through. But it's not necessarily like a requirement to have it on your CV.
And Deon, anything to add on that one as well?
Yeah, look, I think it's, I think if you've got amazing grades, put them on there. Like Amanda said before, a lot of the resumes that these employers are seeing are more or less that, on the broad things that they include, they are they're quite similar. Some of them are very similar. So I totally agree. Putting anything quantifiable that you can in there it takes it a step above just a blanket statement about, I was responsible for this and that. If you've been hands-on involved in things where you've really made a difference, definitely get them in. If you have good grades, put them in. If your grades are middle of the pack and you don't put them in for that reason, I don't really see a downside in that either. Like Amanda said, if you're asked for them, you're gonna provide them, you're gonna submit them. But if you leave them off, I really don't think that's going to work against you.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a bit of a controversial topic. A lot of students get very confused, like, should we put our GPA, should we not? So it's good to hear that either way, it doesn't really matter. It's, I guess, personal preference. So that's definitely reassuring to hear. On the note, I guess, of like standing out on your CV, is there a certain section of the CV or resume that employers pay the most attention to, or do they just kind of look at the full thing?
Yeah, again, depends who you listen to. Look, I think rather than a particular section of your resume, and if there is a section, it's probably in kind of your introduction or your summary or your profile. I really think you want to take the opportunity to get a bit of personality in there as well, because again, what people are reading, they're reading grades, they're reading jobs, they're reading placements and whatever. And quite often in a resume, there's not a lot of personality that comes through. So I think if you take some time to try and get some of that in there, you've really only got a couple of opportunities to kind of get that across. And one is in your resume, and in that I would include your cover letter as well. That really is a document that is really designed, I believe, to get across who you are and what you're all about. The resume is kind of the facts and the figures, and the cover letter is, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, this is why I'm a good fit for your organisation. And obviously the other opportunity is the interview. But with regards to your resume, I think I'd have some sort of profile in there that just paints a little bit of a picture about who you are, and actually, I guess kind of helps to make you seen as more of a person rather than an applicant. And yeah. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Deon. Amanda, anything to add on that as well?
Yeah, I guess trying to make it personal, I had like a personal summary basically at the top of my CV, just a very brief statement about, like who I was, what I'm interested in, particularly in pharmacy. And then I guess in terms of like what section, I tried to tailor it to like depending on where I was applying. So having like the hospital experience at the top, at the start of the CV if I was applying to a hospital, but if I was applying to community, having all my community things at the top, just so it's, I guess they're more focusing on that because it's at the start of the CV. And like, I guess if I'd worked at that hospital, I put that section about that hospital first. Or if I'd done placement somewhere, I listed that one first if I was applying to that hospital, just to, I guess it's, getting the more attention if it's on the front page.
And I guess speaking of placements, Amanda, now that you've mentioned it, did you include like any additional like external placements, or did you also include ones that the university allocated you to?
I definitely included the university ones on my CV. I kind of grouped them together. So I listed like clinical hospital placements and put that I had done these hospitals. And then I guess the achievements and tasks underneath were all linked together. So I didn't have like a specific section for all of them, but it just kind of depends on how many placements you've done. And then I included the like one external placement that I'd done, which was an SHPA summer placement, and talked about that because I guess that's something not everyone may have done. So I did have that in a specific section to try and highlight it more.
Yeah, great. Yeah, definitely. Once again, highlighting like showing off your unique experiences, any extracurriculars, any initiatives you've taken to further your knowledge, I think is just really super important for sure. And Deon, I'm really glad that you actually brought up cover letters before, because that leads us perfectly to our next section. So we're often told to really tailor our cover letters to the values of either the community pharmacy or the hospital pharmacy we are applying to. Do you have any advice on how we can actually tailor the values into our cover letter?
I mean, firstly, you've got to research what the values are of the organisation that you're applying to. So, generally speaking, if that's a hospital, that's certainly going to be on their website somewhere. But, it may or may not be on the website of a community pharmacy. But, I guess I'm not a big fan of if an organisation says we believe in this and this and this, and you address them one by one, almost like their selection criteria for like a government role. I think trying to have it a little bit more broad, a little bit more fluid, but definitely you do want to address the things that that organisation says that they say that they sort of believe in, and they hire against. You are relying on the person who's reading your resume to firstly know and secondly share those values, and that may not be the case. A hospital could be, is a very large organisation. They might have thousands of people. The person who wrote those values could be very, very disconnected from the person who's reading your resume. But again, certainly if the question is should I or shouldn't I, yes, you definitely should. You should be aligning your cover letter in part to the values of the organisation you're applying to.
Yeah, great. Definitely some, valid points over there, Deon. Yeah, I also like the point that you made that the person who created the values might be just a bit smaller in the organization as well. But yeah, so it's something that I feel like we never really think about. Personally, when I'm writing my cover letters, I just think that the person I'm like writing to wrote the values for some reason. But it's good to think, I guess, a little bit bigger about that and think that it's probably like, someone a little bit smaller who is maybe in charge of that. But yeah, definitely valid to include them in the cover letter for sure. Now, Amanda, in your experience, did you kind of include the hospital values into your applications?
Yeah, so sometimes it can be a bit tricky because, you seem like you don't want to be like one of the values is like, I don't know, like working together, and you don't want to just put on your cover letter, I'm good at working with people. Like I kind of looked at them and kind of grouped ones that I thought were the most relevant, because the hospital values could be for any profession in the hospital. So I kind of looked at the ones that I felt were particularly relevant and kind of worked them into my cover letter. Like if they've got about working together, I had an example of where I had teamwork in the cover letter and talked about my experience there. If they're talking about like patient care as a value, I kind of had a specific example of like when I'd gone above and beyond to ensure patient care for a specific example. So trying to work it in the cover letter, but not having it like you're ticking a box of like checking off that you've addressed every single value of the hospital.
Yeah,
so I feel like it's kind of a balance of addressing it, but not making it seem kind of robotic of ticking them off.
Yeah, exactly. I really like that. Kind of just not like just stating the values for the sake of it, but actually giving an example of how you've demonstrated the value. Yeah, definitely something that I feel like a lot of our students will be aiming to do in our cover letters coming up. Now, another, I think, concern that a lot of students have when writing cover letters is it's really hard to balance showing off your skills and your passions. Do you have any advice on this, either of you?
Look, I guess you're telling a story about yourself. So I think, you don't want to go on about how great you are, but you do want to talk about the things that you believe in, the things that you think are your key strengths. Like I said before, you only have a couple of cracks at getting this information across. And if somebody is reading a cover letter and they've done more than 5 minutes in recruitment, they will be expecting to see that. So I think putting in there the things that you think are good about you and what might make you fit an organisation, they're certainly not out of place. That's where they're supposed to be. And as long as you don't sort of overdo it, I think you definitely want to be telling a good story about yourself as a person, because they're looking, as much as they're looking for, I guess, an academic and an experiential fit, they're also looking for a culture fit as well. So if you don't tell them what you're about and the kind of person that you are, then they don't know, or they're going to assume. They'll probably assume wrong, and again, you're on the back foot. So make sure you're telling a good story about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I like that idea of just thinking of it like you're telling a story and just being really authentic and showing your experiences. I think that's a great idea for sure. And Amanda, do you have similar beliefs to this as well?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes it can feel weird talking about yourself. You're like, I'm good at this and I'm good at that. But like you do have to show what your strengths are. Something else I also like to put in my cover letter was try and link my interests with what the hospital offers. Like I'd really look into specific things that are unique for that hospital. Like, are they known for emergency and trauma? And you could talk about that that's an area you're interested in because you had a good experience on placement in this area. So trying linking what the hospital's offering and what your passions are, so they can see you're genuinely interested in working there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you both for that. Yeah, very important to be genuine and authentic in your CV, of course, and also your cover letter. And I guess in the interviews too, which leads us to our next section, is the important interviews. So for either of you, how can you best prepare for an interview? What advice can you give us on this?
I guess prepare as much as you can. Like I wouldn't go into it thinking, oh yeah, I'll just like wing it and see what they ask me. Like the benefit is that you can prepare because in general they do ask similar questions. So I think kind of gathering like a bank of potential questions. I literally had like a giant Word document of like potential interview questions and dot points of like things that I could say and like kind of crafting particular answers. Like obviously you don't want to read out robotically in an interview, but you want to have like a general idea of points that you want to make. So I think having that and asking like past interns what interview questions did they get, or even looking online, like there's so many resources of potential interview questions that you can use, and just like going through that, practicing with friends. I would like practice interviews with my family and just get them to ask me questions and see how I could respond and what I could improve on. I think it's also really helpful to keep like a bank of scenarios as well, like things that you've done well at work or on placement. And like I literally had a list of all different skills, like teamwork, communication with patients, communication with health professionals, and had like a list of things that I had done that were specific for that. Because it's quite often they can ask you, like, tell me a time when you had to deal with like working with someone you didn't agree on and how did you manage that? And then you can think, oh, I've got this example. And personally, for those kind of behavioral questions, I think using the STAR method is like the best way to answer it. Like it stops you rambling about the situation, whereas you've like, yep, this is the situation, this is the task, this is what we did, and this was the results. I think using that kind of formula to respond to those questions can be really helpful as well to make sure you're hitting all those points. Yeah, so those are the main things. I think just try and prepare as much as you can and practice answering questions beforehand.
Yeah, and what about yourself, Deon?
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with Amanda more. Certainly the research. So, quite often if somebody doesn't do a lot of interviewing, one of the first questions they might ask is, so what do you know about us? And if you have to look them in the face and go, not much, you're on a hiding to nothing. So do some research on the organisation. Certainly if you can go in armed with scenarios where you have excelled in certain areas. So, it might be teamwork, might be conflict, whatever. It's so much more powerful to say, yeah, I think I'm pretty good, with handling conflict. I remember one time we had blah, blah, blah came into this shop and this is what I did, rather than just saying, yeah, no, I'm pretty good with that. Having those real world examples, again, is so powerful. Yeah, those are the two biggest things I would say. It's just research and the role play, again, 100%. It's not fun. I don't think I've ever met anybody who likes it, but if you can find someone who'll sit there and ask you questions, then it's just going to get you more comfortable in rattling off those answers. So again, if you can find someone to do that, pretend to interview you, take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think
I
it's
would
definitely
literally
great.
Sorry.
No, yeah,
I was just going to add on
like
researching about the hospital. I think on the SHPA website, like they literally they upload a document about the hospital and like know like specific things that hospital is known for, or they offer, like they do partnered pharmacist charting, or they offer therapeutic drug monitoring, and like knowing specific things, then you can bring those out and be like, yep, this is what is specific about this hospital. So they can, automatically see that you have done your research and you're not just being like, oh, because it's a hospital, I'm applying.
Yeah,
like there's so much information out there. Like I think they offer like info nights as well through SHPA, where you can like, each hospital talks about their intern program. So like listen to as many of those as you can, so you already know, what they're specifically looking for.
Yeah, they did have a few info nights for sure. And even doing site visits as well is something that I've been encouraged to do. It's a great way, especially if you haven't had a placement there, to just go and introduce yourself to the team and the education pharmacist, at least, who's more often than not going to be on the interview panel. So definitely love the idea of doing research and having that example bank and practicing with people who are, I guess, willing to listen. So it's definitely some great advice there. I think an interview question that stumps a lot of people is the introductory question. Tell us about yourself. There are so many things we could say in this question, but how do you think that we can incorporate, I guess, pharmacy specific skills into this response and really show them who we are? Because it's timed, I guess. We don't have all the time in the world to give a response.
Yeah, you're right. You don't want to ramble, but I would say you don't want to start out talking about, I think if you start out talking about you as a pharmacist first, then it can seem a bit sort of contrived. I think you really talk about yourself a little bit first. As I said, this is your first chance. Quite often, not always, obviously, but quite often this is your first chance to talk with someone face to face. So if you just start talking about this is my pharmacy journey and this is what I want to do, it's like you've missed the opportunity to help as best you can help that person get to know you a little bit better as a human being, as a person right in front of them, right in front of their face. So definitely, I would say open up talking about yourself. Obviously, that they want to know about you, but they do want to know about you as a pharmacist. So you've got to get there. You've got to take them through that. And as you say, you only have so long. So you don't want to ramble at the start, but you don't want to dive right into you as a pharmacist either. You want to take them through who you are as a person, and then I guess next step is who you are as a pharmacist.
Yeah, definitely. I love that structure as well. Just giving them a little bit more of a general intro to you and then making it a little bit more pharmacy specific towards the end, because the whole interview is probably going to be about pharmacy stuff. So it's nice to just show them who you are at the start a little bit more as well. Like, what else do you like to do outside of pharmacy? So that's some great advice then. Amanda, what about yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Important to talk about like something you do outside of pharmacy, like a hobby or something like that. I think in most of my interviews, they did kind of at the start, like have a little bit of a chat and like pulled off on something. I think I had mentioned in my like VidCruiter, which is like the pre-interview application recorded interview questions. They actually like started talking about like one of the non-pharmacy things that I had talked about in that. So I think it is good to like helps you build a little bit of rapport and they see, a little bit more of your personality. And then in terms of the pharmacy things, I kind of talked about, like where I'm studying, like I guess where I've had work experience in, and then a little bit about like briefly why I chose pharmacy, because then that could be another question. So you don't want to go like necessarily too much into detail, but you can talk a little bit about, I guess, why you're interested in pharmacy and like a brief thing about, I guess, why you even applied to that hospital or interested in hospital versus community, depending on where you're interviewing. So yeah, you want like a nice summary overall of like your personality and then your current experience, and then why you're applying as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to hear that they mentioned things that you said in your VidCruiter interview. So advice for everyone, just make sure you remember what you say in that. It's very interesting. I guess another thing that a lot of students get confused about is whether or not to ask questions at the end of the interview. And if so, what kind of things should you be looking to ask? Deon, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Should you be asking questions? Absolutely. For a couple of reasons. It looks good and it shows that you are interested, but you also, you are also making a decision that's got to work for you as well. So the last thing you want to do is leave that interview and think, I should have asked this, I should have asked that. With regards to specific questions, I guess one of the questions that we tell our candidates always to ask is, towards the end, is there any other information that I can give you that might help you make a decision about whether I'm a good fit for this role and good fit for this organisation? Is there anything else you want to cover? Because again, just like you don't want to leave that interview and not have asked the questions you want to ask, you also don't want them sitting there thinking, oh, damn, we forgot to ask this. So you asking that question might be the prompt for them to, remember something else that they want to cover off, because, depending on how many interviews are in their process, that might be the only time that they get to gather the information that they're going to make a decision on. And if they do that and they leave without a key piece of information, that could quite likely work against you, especially if it's something really important and they don't know. They might seek you out and get an answer, or they might think, we don't know that answer, so maybe we're better off leaning more towards someone who we do have that piece of information about rather than someone we don't. And the other question, I guess, to finish off would be, ask them what the next steps are, because quite often, they may not elaborate and you don't want to go home and think, how long is it going to be? You don't hear in 3 days and you think, oh, well, I guess I've missed out, but that's just how long their process takes. So you can get a bit of an understanding about what the next steps are and how long they might take. You can manage your own expectations too about, when you might hear from someone or what the next step might be.
Definitely. And just a quick question, Deon, in terms of next steps, do you recommend that candidates email the interviewers afterwards to thank them for the interview?
Always. Yeah. Absolutely. Firstly, it's courteous, and that's always appreciated, shows a level of professionalism, but it's also another way to get your name in front of them. And, every time they read your name, every time they have an interaction with you, you become a little bit more familiar. With familiarity comes comfort. And if they can be more comfortable making a decision for you or in your favour, then that can only be a good thing. So, yeah, absolutely. We advise everybody, send an email, just thank them. You don't have to ask for anything. Just thanks very much. It was great to chat. It was great to learn about the hospital. It was great to learn about the pharmacy. Look forward to hearing from you. That's literally all it has to be.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Deon. And Amanda, any advice on follow-up emails and I guess any questions to ask at the end of the interview?
A question that I like to ask at the end of interviews is like asking the interviewer what their favorite thing about working at that place is. I feel like it's just a nice question to ask, and then it gets them talking about what they enjoy working at that hospital or that pharmacy. I feel like it's just a nice ending question, and you can see would you enjoy working in that environment as well, I guess. In terms of follow-up emails, I can't remember. I feel like it's a bit different with the SHPA process because it's such they have their timeline and their processes. So I don't think I did email afterwards because we might not have had an email address for someone to send that email to. So definitely for community interviews or potentially other states in their hospital process. But I think with SHPA there wasn't really as much that opportunity because they had such a, I guess, specific application process that we had to follow.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, both of you, for giving us some advice on interviews. For our final question of the night, before we move on to the Q&A section, would both of you like to give any general advice for our students looking to land a full-time job in 2025? I might start with Deon.
Land a full-time job?
Yeah, or the internship, which will be our full-time job next year.
Yeah, look, I think probably one of the most important things, I think, like I touched on before, it always pays to keep in mind that these people are running businesses. And yes, they're passionate about their industry. They want to help you coming through. They want to help you with your internship. But there is a commercial reality that they're hiring against as well. So, anything you can show about yourself that's going to reassure them on that front as well is going to be really, really important. But, like you touched on before, it's really important to be authentic. It's really important to be yourself. If you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. So just go into your interview. We always advise people be positive, confident, and happy in your interview. So be positive, be confident, not too overconfident, and just try and be as happy as you can in there, because you're asking these people to spend a year and a half of their working life with you. You want to come across as someone who's going to be, good to have around, who's going to be keen on learning, who's going to be reliable, and, just a good member of the team. So, look, you can only talk about yourself, unless you want to tell lies, which would not advisable. You can only talk about yourself as you are. You won't be a good fit for everybody, and not everywhere will be a good fit for you. The other thing I would say, I forgot to touch on before about the interviews, is it is important to ask those questions, and it is important to answer their questions. Another thing to keep in mind is just make sure that the things that they're telling you are kind of in line with how you feel. So, we had an instance a little while ago where we had a client who said they would tell us, we're really about our staff. We want our staff to be comfortable. We really want to get to know them. We've got a really great culture. And then our candidate said, yeah, they said that, but they really didn't ask me any questions. They kind of talked to me for an hour, and it doesn't feel like they are a business who is about their staff and who do want to have a culture where everybody, gets on and knows everybody else. So just make sure there's an alignment with kind of the things that they say and the way that they make you feel during the process as well. If we're really great about our our candidate experience, our employee experience, but the application process is an absolute nightmare, well then, maybe they're not as committed to that experience as they say they are.
Yeah, definitely. I really love that idea of alignment, because whilst you're also there for the interview, you also kind of need to interview them to see if that's a place that you'd like to work to. Yeah. And Amanda, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think just try and prepare as much as you can, like listen to all the info sessions, research as much as you can, prepare for the interview as much as you can. And yeah, try and be as genuine as you can in the interview. Like it can be stressful, but it's also okay if you don't know something in the interview, particularly with like the clinical questions. I know I was quite like worried about those for the hospital interviews, but like your intern year that you're applying for is the year that you're there to learn. So they're not expecting that you know everything. They're more just wanting to see like your thought process. So as long as you're like talking through what you're thinking and where you would look for more information if you're not sure about something, I think that shows a lot as well. So I don't try and stress about having to have the answer for everything for those clinical questions as well. But yeah, just trying to prepare as much as you can.
Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said about the clinical questions as well, because it's definitely something that we all stress over too, just not knowing the answer. But yeah, I like the point that you made about just talking through the process. If you don't know the answer, where would you look? What would you do? So yeah, I definitely think that's some great advice for how to manage those types of questions for sure. Well, thank you so much, Amanda and Deon, for this conversation tonight, or this first part of the discussion. I'm sure our audience and the students will really appreciate all the advice and guidance that you've given for our future internship applications. And we're really grateful that we could have this discussion with you all today. I might open it up to our students now to see if anyone has any questions or if there's anything in the chat. Oh, yes, I see a question here. So Afra says, thank you so much for the valuable info. She wanted to ask if you had any advice for group interviews, specifically as some hospitals use this as part of their application process.
Group interviews can definitely be tricky. I think I did 2 group interviews. So they had like a group section and then an individual one after. I think it's just really about like listening to other people that are in your session and like trying to build off what they're saying in a genuine way. You don't want to be like, oh yeah, I agree with this. Like, be genuine about it. But yeah, about like bouncing off their ideas. I think the ones I had was like there was a like clinical scenario to work through as a group. So yeah, not trying to like butt in and answer all the questions yourself, listening to other people in the group as well, and building on their ideas and adding to that. So I think, yeah, like listening to the others is really important. Like you want to be able to still talk definitely in the group interview so then they can see what your thoughts are. But yeah, listening to the other group members' ideas and things like that, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And Deon, anything to add about group interviews in general?
Yeah, I guess if by group interviews you're talking about there's many applicants in the room, then I agree 100%. You don't want to be a wallflower because, again, it's another one of these limited opportunities you have to showcase yourself, but you also don't want to dominate every conversation either. And if there's questions going to a group and you're the first person to answer every time, then, it's probably not going to look that great. If it's more of a panel style interview where there's lots of them and one of you, I guess probably the most important thing is to try and just not be intimidated. I know a lot of people feel that it is quite intimidating if you're sitting across the table from 3 or 4 people, as opposed to sort of a one-on-one. But at the end of the day, we tell everyone it's just a discussion. Like at the end of the day, yes, you want the outcome to go your way. You want that internship, but it is just a discussion. And quite often the people doing it aren't super comfortable doing the interviews either. They're nervous. So, don't let it get to you. Just really answer each question to the person who asked it as if you would if it was a one-on-one.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Deon. And I've noticed that Christine has a question for you in the chat. So as a recruiter, do you use LinkedIn as a tool to screen candidates? Is it important to have a complete active LinkedIn profile?
As a recruiter, I spend about 80% of my waking hours on LinkedIn. So in short, absolutely. Yeah, look, given how powerful it is, given its reach, and it's a free tool, you should absolutely have a really well built out LinkedIn profile. We certainly use it. We use it to to reach people. We use it to assess people, and absolutely so will the people that are hiring in a community setting or a hospital setting. They'll be looking at your LinkedIn profile as well. It's sort of almost a little bit now like if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you're the exception rather than the rule. So, it might be a little bit like, I wonder why this person isn't on LinkedIn, such as, the curse of social media, but, we have to be on it. Definitely you want to have a complete padded out LinkedIn profile. And if you go on there, either go on LinkedIn itself, or you can, like we talked about before, there's just untold information on the internet about how to build out your LinkedIn profile, what it should be like, what it should include. LinkedIn themselves have lots and lots of advice. I think they've got tutorial videos and everything on there. So short of time, there's no excuse not to have a good LinkedIn profile. And as time goes, I think it's a really good way to spend, what might only be an hour or two, but it could make all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to know that LinkedIn has tutorials as well for building your profile, because I feel like it's, really difficult to get started sometimes. So having that resource is super useful for sure.
Yeah, sometimes those resources can be hard to find on LinkedIn itself. But if you look, quite often the search result will be some sort of hidden, or not hidden, but a LinkedIn page that isn't easy to find on the site. But it is on there. And if it's not on there, you'll find 100,000 other search results that'll have information on there about, how to build a good LinkedIn profile.
Oh, yeah. And I've even noticed actually on Instagram as well, the LinkedIn's Instagram page, they sometimes have advice on creating a profile too. So definitely checking out all the socials. Amanda, in your experience, has LinkedIn been used to screen, I guess, in hospitals as well?
I'm actually not sure. I actually did not have a LinkedIn last year when I was applying. So, but I definitely think it is helpful, because then it's like, I guess, a nice concise summary of your CV almost, which is like nice to have. So I think it is better to have one in that, they can easily kind of review your experience and things like that. So it's not like definitely something that I need to look more into and have kind of develop that further. But
yeah, definitely. We do have a question from Christine about what are the key areas of a profile or LinkedIn profile that you look at when screening for candidates, and how can a student stand out essentially?
Yeah, again, it is a tricky one, because it is, like I said about your resume before, you are right at the early, you're at the early stages of your career. So quite often it's hard, while I say you want it, it's hard to pad out a really complete, relevant LinkedIn profile, because quite often it's hard to put stuff in terms of what we look at. We look at the work experience, and primarily there we're looking at, are you already in the industry? Are you already working in a pharmacy setting somewhere or another? But we're also looking at that stability as well. The other thing I was going to mention before about your profile is anywhere that you have worked in the industry, get the person that you reported to write your recommendation on your LinkedIn profile as well. I know you're all going to put your referees down, and if you get to the pointy end of the deal and someone's considering employing you, they should do those reference checks. But if you can get on the front foot and they're reading through your LinkedIn profile and they're seeing a few people that they might either know, or they should respect their sort of opinion in the industry, in the sector, and they're saying good things about you and about the time that you spent there, then again, that can't work against you.
Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of the recommendation feature, and getting previous managers or people you've reported to write your recommendation. And you can even write one for them as well if they'd like to. Can be reciprocal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we have just a couple more questions that I'll answer just in the Q&A here. So we'll start off with Ramin's question. So for Amanda, do you have any strategies in preferencing hospitals?
Yeah, it was definitely very tricky when you, technically you're preferencing all of them, but only the top two are kind of really getting looked at. So my strategy was ones that I had experience at, because I felt like I had more of a connection to that hospital and working there or doing placement there. But I think as long as it's a hospital that is offering something that you're particularly interested in, then that's good. I know some people would preference more regional or rural hospitals because they might get less applicants. So that's something to consider. Also important to consider for international students as well, looking at the hospitals which have the non-government funded positions. I think that's really important to look at as well. So are you actually able to apply for those positions. So I think, yeah, looking at the hospitals, what they're offering, if you've done placements or if you work there, and using that to kind of get your two preferences. Having said that, if you put another hospital below, I think I had a regional hospital as a lower preference, but I still did get asked to interviews. So you never know, like depending on where you're ranking them, you might still be offered an interview at another hospital that is lower on your preference list.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Amanda, for answering that one. Ramin did have another question for either Deon or yourself. Should we use the STAR approach in our cover letter when we are mentioning examples?
I think I would say yes, if you can do it succinctly. I think when you start to go down that method of answering or elaborating on a point, you can very easily elaborate and go on too much. And, you don't want, your cover letter should probably be a page long and, 3 or 4 paragraphs, and you don't want necessarily an entire paragraph to be about one particular situation. I would probably err more towards using that style of discussing points or asking questions for a face-to-face interview than in your cover letter.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't think on my cover letter I had that approach because it would just get too long. But yeah, definitely use that in answering interview questions.
Definitely. And I do realize that we are at 7:30. Both of you happy to answer 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up?
Of course.
Amazing. Thanks so much. So from Joshua, our interviewer is expecting you to be prepared to answer questions regarding situations that can cause confidential, professional, or ethical dilemmas.
Are they expecting you to answer them?
Oh, yeah, or be prepared to answer them. Yeah.
Some not. Whether they expect you to or not, definitely don't. They shouldn't put you in a situation where you need to elaborate to that sort of level of detail to answer a question. They've probably asked the wrong question, but even so, just don't do it. It's not going to look good. It's not going to paint you in a good light. And ultimately, again, somebody could be thinking, well, if they'll tell me something confidential about their last role, then will they tell the next employer something confidential about my pharmacy or our hospital setting or something that's taken place in it? So if you think that you're heading towards any of those situations, I would pump the brakes and err on the side of confidentiality in a big way every single time.
Yeah, great. And Amanda?
Yeah, completely agree. Don't really have much to add for that. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, great advice on that, Deon. Thank you. And for our last question of today's session from Afra, in terms of references, do you recommend putting them on the resume? And if so, how should we be listing them? Should this be at the start or the end, or even like what types of people should be our references?
Yeah, I did put for my hospital applications, I did have my references on my CV. It was just on the last page. And so I basically just put their name, their role, so they know like when they're calling this person, who they're calling, and like then what relationship you've had with them. And then I just had the phone number on there as well. I think some applications do specify that they want your references in the application, like when you're applying rather than in your CV. So it just depends on where you're applying to. I think in terms of who you're selecting, I know one of the hospitals that I applied to wanted 2 references from like different jobs that I'd had. So they wanted like one from a hospital role, one from community. They didn't want them from the same workplace. So that's something to keep in mind. Whereas other ones were happy to have 2 references from the same workplace. I think it's important to have someone that you've worked with like a decent amount of time or has seen you like at work enough to be able to give a good recommendation. Like they've seen you, I guess going above and beyond at work, so then they can be able to provide that positive reference. You can ask like people that you've been on placement with to be a reference, but I just think that you have to have like a certain amount of time with them on placement so they have enough to talk about. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Amanda. And Deon?
Yeah, I think it's important to have, most of the employers we work with, they want to hear from people that you reported to. I think they put a little bit more weight in that than maybe someone you worked alongside. I totally agree with Amanda that person has to know, they have to know enough about you through their time spent with you to be able to give a decent reference. Otherwise, if it doesn't provide enough information, they're probably going to come back to you and ask you for another one anyway. They definitely live at the end of your resume. depending on how many you're applying for, I know a lot of people they'll put available on request, and they won't actually list them. And there's a reason for that. And it's largely, if you're applying for a lot of roles, then quite often a lot of those people will just conduct a reference as a first step, sometimes before they've even spoken to you. And you've got a poor referee who's at the other end of the phone 8, 10, 12 times, just getting absolutely hammered for references for roles that you're not even going to interview for. So, it depends on, again, I guess it depends on the relationship you have with them, but I would always ask them, obviously, if you're going to put their personal contact details in, ask them, tell them that you have, and just give them a bit of a heads up. Whenever someone says we're going to do, that's great, we've enjoyed the interview, we're going to do references, whatever, then get in touch with those people and say, look, maybe expect a call in the next, day or so. It's 50-50 on whether you put them in or not. I would tend to probably put them in the pharmacy space, and especially the stage you're at in your career. Put them in, but definitely let the people know that you're putting them in and when to expect a call.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Really appreciating the fact that you both stayed on 5 minutes extra as well to speak to our students and answer the questions. So thank you so much for joining us today and for providing such insightful advice on all things intern applications. On behalf of Dose of Pharma and VPSA, we are just really grateful to have had the chance to have spoken with you both. And we're excited to see your career journeys and what you continue to achieve. You have both already achieved amazing things. So we're excited to see, and all the best for the future, and all the best for our students as well on the call and who are watching this recording. I really hope that your intern applications go well and that the session benefited you as much as it's benefited me and those in the call at the moment. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night and enjoy your weekend.
Dose of Pharma acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands throughout Australia on which we connect today, and pays respect to elders past, present, and future.